Okay,
Maybe it was already on.
so it's now after 1 and we're going to call this meeting to order. If anyone has a declaration of interest, you will need to make a written report on that, and Sally has the form if you need to fill it out. We'll move on to adoption of the agenda. It's resolved that the agenda for the November 29th, 2023 Policy and Planning Advisory Committee meeting be adapted as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Okay, moved by Stephen, second by,
I can do that. Helen Yanch.
okay, thanks, Helen. Any discussion or changes before we move on? No? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Have we got quorum?
I got my hand up.
Yep.
Maybe if Dina could just indicate.
I'm
Dina,
in favor.
Okay, good. So we have.
So
Okay,
yes, we just have.
okay.
And now.
Oh, good. Okay, so moving on then to the resolution that the minutes of the Policy and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held on May the 1st, 2023 be received and approved as printed. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Stephen, second by, who's that second? I can't see. Taylor, thank you, Taylor. Any admissions or errors that anyone has noted in those minutes?
Nope.
Seeing not, okay, seeing not by show of hands, we will indicate your approval of the minutes. So, yeah.
I approve.
Yeah, they have gone. Now we're going to move on to our main reason why we're here today. The resolution is that the Policy and Planning Committee recommend that the Board of Directors
How
approve.
you faring? Good. Yeah. What are you up to?
I just got back yesterday.
Hello. Yeah. So I'll just run through that again. Resolved that the Policy and Planning Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve revision of the wetland offsetting policy and other changes to MVCA's development interference with wetlands and alternations to shorelines and watercourses policy as set out in report 3372/23. Someone's going to address the policy?
Yes, that'll be.
Oh, do we need a mover and a seconder first, though, don't we?
You can.
Yeah, let's move in second so we get this out of the way. Moved by Stephen, second by, is that Helen?
Yes.
Okay, okay, so we'll have a presentation on it now.
Good afternoon. I believe we are live now with the technology. So as you read in the meeting minutes, we're going to discuss some wetland offsetting guidelines that we are working on developing as an addendum to our regulations policy. The reason for doing this is because of the increasing demand for housing on less than ideal sites. The practice is currently accepted in other jurisdictions, and many other CAs also have similar policies and guidelines. And we're getting into a situation of extremely constrained lands with these development pressures and directions from the province to increase development and housing. So this policy update and development guideline that we're going to create will provide clarity of expectations of what the CA process will be when we face these challenges. It will improve and streamline the approvals process because expectations will be known ahead of time, and we'll achieve better ecological outcomes because, again, we're all fighting and discussing for the same goals. And then the history is that offsetting has often been seen as a standard direction taken for past files. It's just not been standardized, particularly here in Eastern Ontario. And that the principle will always remain, as a regulation does, is protect first. Offsetting should never become a default choice. It is the last resort when we have no other way to move forward with a file, such as if an MZO comes up, and that that protection first needs to be considered every step along the way. Where can we save? Where can we gain? And the way that's done, and the common terminology is called the mitigation hierarchy. So it's your decision tree, and you start with avoid impacts. Avoid as many impacts as possible, be it through timing, be it through site selection, be it through implementing buffers, then minimize. What you can't avoid, minimize. Whether that's in timing, duration, intensity, and then you mitigate and restore what you do have to disturb. And then beyond that, if you have to go another step further, you offset, which is creating new habitat to offset for what's lost, plus a little bit more. And that little bit more comes from the concept of net gain. We will always go for the key objective of replacing lost functions, which include both biological structures as well as hydrological, water capacity, floodplain management, groundwater recharge, all those other functions of a wetland, for a net gain. If we're going to lose something, we want to make sure it works. And the reason why we want to gain is because it takes time to make sure something is going to work. It's an industry standard that's commonly applied across Ontario. It allows for the complexities and uncertainties, as well as time lags of projects, and it creates a surplus of area built into the contingency plan in case portions of built features do not end up functioning as intended. Drought seasons, flood seasons, those can wipe out the best laid plans in a design. So to put it in numbers in an easy to read table, we are proposing that the guideline have a minimum offset for a wetland area of 2 to 1. So for every 1 area of lost wetland, we request 2 to be built. That will get us along the path to that net gain. And then also, as we have regulatory areas adjacent to wetlands, we also request that those areas have an offset value of 1 to 1, so that even a newly created wetland will also have a protected buffer. The location of the offsetting is key. On-site is preferred. The closer to the area of disturbance, the better, because any animals displaced from that area will be able to move into the new habitat. The water hydrology flows of that system will not be as heavily impacted if on-site offsetting is chosen. Where that's not possible, we then go through another kind of hierarchy of site selection of within the same subwatershed, within the same river catchment, and then within our own jurisdiction. But the closer, the better. But sometimes that's not possible because of constrained sites. We don't want to encourage people to cut down a forest just to make a wetland, or because of Canadian shield bedrock that might impede our ability to make a functional wetland. So we do have to take those things into consideration when going through the design consultation process for an offset. We also want to make sure that those lands that a new habitat is created in will be publicly owned and protected for all time, because that's the whole point of creating that wetland, is because something was going to be lost for all time. So we want to make sure it's protected for all time. And then limitations and challenges, as I said, it can be difficult or impossible to replace some wetlands due to their complexity and vulnerability. Features such as bogs and fens will not be discussed. It's just too hard to replicate their function. They take thousands of years to develop those ecological balances and hydrological systems. Timelines to install an offsetting of a marsh or swamp can still also be quite long to reach functionality, but it is more achievable. A created wetland may never reach the same level of functionality as the lost system does. And that's another reason why this is a last resort option that we want to discuss. Quantifying ecosystem functions, equivalencies, and net gains is going to be challenging to take account of. Even once a system is built, being able to say it's equivalent to what was lost is going to be very challenging. And constrained sites, as I said, is another challenge to making sure that these things function within the watershed where damage occurred. Any questions?
Any questions?
You want to stop sharing?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Kelly. Do I see a hand up? No, I have a, oh, go ahead,
Definitely.
Stephen, go ahead.
Oh, Steve.
Maybe I'm missing the boat. So if you're damaging a wetland or changing a wetland, you got to provide 2 for 1. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So how do you make that happen?
It's strictly based on an area measurement. So if a development is coming in here saying, we've moved past the regulations process through an MZO or something like that, and we have permission to damage a wetland of a hectare. We're going to say you need to create 2 hectares of wetland habitat to offset for that loss. We need that habitat gain, that hydrological gain somewhere. And the reason why it's 2 to 1 is just to make sure, because if we ask for 1 to 1 and then half of it didn't function, we're going to be not getting that net gain. We're not even going to be breaking even in function. So by asking for extra 2 to 1, hopefully the functionality will be there at least 1 to 1.
I think I heard you say it's best to have it where it was before or
Yes.
move to the other side.
Yeah,
Can it be done? Are we okay with it being off-site someplace else?
again, there's a hierarchy. We have a preference for it to be on site or in an adjacent tributary. And then sometimes, yes, the scale ends up going down the stream that it ends up in another subwatershed. That is definitely the case that other CAs run into. Just because, like I said, we have constrained sites, whether it's forested land beside a wetland or whether it's Canadian Shield interfering with being able to get good functionality out of a wetland design. We need to be able to consider creating a more robust habitat somewhere else.
Yeah, because maybe, obviously know more
Yeah.
about it than I do, but if you ruin half a wetland, you're quite likely going to ruin the whole thing. Am I right?
Because of the hydrological connection, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is a very sensitive topic. It is definitely something discussed all across Ontario and wider, that this is really not preferred to approve disrupting wetlands, and that's why we have the regulation that we do to protect all wetlands. However, there are circumstances where that's not possible, whether it's because of a roadside, say for example, a road front wetland is restricting access to the upland buildable area of a lot of record. We want that person to still be able to use their lot of record. Our board made the decision to say, we're not going to sterilize lots. But that does mean that they're going to disturb a piece of wetland to get in that driveway. So how are we going to get them to offset? What's going to be our policy? What's going to be our process? So those are things that we need to consider with this, is that that kind of negotiation will be allowed when we adopt this kind of as an addendum to our policy.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So Kelly, I have a question.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you're moving a wetland from here to here and creating a wetland, it's going to have an effect on the neighbors around it.
yes.
What's in place to, if I have a nice green lawn now and no water and there's a wetland put beside me and all of a sudden I become a swamp?
Yes, so hopefully in the design process, there'll be a hydrologic study and an environmental impact study and those kind of classification studies to inform that and say that we need to contain the work within these property boundaries. We need the impacts to be here. And then move forward with that, because just like the Drainage Act, you can't force water onto your neighbor's property and you can't restrict water from entering your neighbor's property.
Mhm.
Those same principles will still apply with creating these wetlands. So it all has to come down to good site selection. And that fully encompasses, what are the implications on neighboring ecosystems, not just neighboring land rights, but the ecosystem that was existing across that property line. How would our change impact that?
So I guess part of what we put into this whole project in determining what exactly, where and exactly how it can be developed is going to be very important.
Yeah, which is why we need these guidelines that will help
Yeah.
structure the conversation. And again, all of this is sort of intended to be proponent led and that we will be the review agency. But for a proponent to know what kind of package we need to review, we need a clear guideline on what questions to ask.
Yeah. Just one
Yeah.
other question.
Yeah.
Again, if I'm the neighbor,
Yeah.
do I have a right of appeal without costing a fortune?
I don't know how that works with the rest of our regulations policies when we're approving a cut and fill or we're approving a shoreline work or something else in a regulated area, how that may impact the neighbor. Hopefully the whole point of doing a cut and fill permit is that you don't impact the neighbor by
Okay.
doing something on your lot.
Yeah.
So there is a process.
Yeah, and
for
it's
review.
more than just the water, like.
Yeah.
With that water comes mosquitoes, and with mosquitoes comes disease, so.
And hopefully it will also come with insectivores, birds, bats, other things that will eat those insects that live in that ecosystem and then become more robust and healthy. So yes, I definitely see the concerns for things like West Nile and anything else that a mosquito might transmit. But hopefully we're also creating a robust habitat that supports frogs that eat mosquitoes and bats and, you know, that whole predator-prey relationship cycle because that habitat exists.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dina, you had a question?
Yeah.
Developers going to hire a consultant, put together their report or their suggestion on how they're going to mitigate this. Do the MBCA have the authority to yay or nay that document and say this isn't going to work or this is going to work?
That'll be part of the consulting process. Just like we review environmental impact statements for development proposals, we say this document is not sufficient. Please give us a better map. Please give us more information. Please do more study. That's already part of our workflow for other things that we review. So it would not be hard to add that to our workflow for something like this. So.
Go ahead, Sally.
Temperamental, these things. One of the things that really helps a process like this to work is if when an applicant comes into their municipality for the land use approval, that the planning department is immediately sending them to us so that these things can go in tandem. So because you ultimately want all of these issues dealt with concurrently if you can, because the worst case scenario is a municipality proceeds to give permission and then they come to us looking for a permit and we're not able to approve what the municipality has approved. So, and then that also means that it can be part and parcel of the municipality's consultation process, in that whatever they're producing for the municipality, hopefully if they know already what we're going to be asking for, that can be part of their submission and part of whatever goes out to the public. So working collaboratively in the review, both from a land use planning perspective and conservation authority permit perspective, can help ensure that kind of fulsome analysis out of the gate.
Any other questions? I have one more. Sally, just, because it's going to be a really a marriage between the municipality and the CA on implementing this. And are you going to be sending out to the different municipalities a draft once we have the edits done for the proposed offsetting policy, wetland offsetting policy?
I'm gonna pass this over to Matt. We do meet regularly with your planning departments, and maybe if you could share some thoughts on how you would see us sharing this information. Would it be part of our annual workshop that we would do with them or something separate?
So the city of Ottawa, many of these offsetting policies that we're talking about are actually derived from the city in their official plan. So they already have the concept 2-to-1. So they're certainly aware of it. We are having a planners forum with all the planners from Leonard County. I believe it's January or February. I can't remember the exact date, but this has been a topic that they're aware of. And actually the planners are presenting some of the problem files, and we're going to be talking about offsetting and solutions. So they're certainly aware of it. And obviously there's a need. We need to have kind of a formalized list of what is expected from the proponent and what we review. So it's not a new topic, but one that we'll be discussing shortly with them.
Thank you. That was helpful. Any other questions or comments?
Yes,
Stephen?
if I may, that just sparked as on the Lanark County Land Division, we have enough confusion as it is right now. How do you see, is that going to come on as conditions or development agreements, or how are we going, how is that, how do you perceive that coming?
So offsetting and severance files.
We
you're
may
thinking
not
of?
see it too much on consents, but you see it on some bigger stuff, right?
You will see it on bigger things, but I think how the process will work is that you'll be talking about the development in principle far ahead of the game before you get to the offsetting agreement. So in principle, is this going to be accepted? What are the rules around offsetting? So I think a lot of the details will be ironed out by the time it gets to an actual planning decision. And the players should, the municipality, the conservation authority, and the proponent should have some agreement, or it's not going to move forward.
Something you mentioned earlier, Bev, if that's in the agreement beforehand, will the neighbors be seeing the conditions on the agreement? And here we go. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be interesting.
The Conservation Authority Act is not an act that is designed for public consultation of permitting, but given if it's part of a planning approval, that act is, allows for public consultation and input and comments. And we are aware if someone is concerned about a file, they have no problem submitting their comments to the authority, and we certainly consider those.
But it's our meetings that get lively.
Yes, well, that's part of the game. So
Thank you.
And just one more thing, it is again, still stressed preferred that this is not the first option, right? We will be working with any developer proponent, whether it's a single lot severance or subdivision scale project, to stay out of the regulated areas. They function best the way they are. It's better to stay out of them. But if push comes to shove and we cannot keep them out of the regulated area, this is an option to still get a benefit for the environment at the end.
So the rule is, no, we still don't want wetlands, but this might be a way to,
We
work
still want to
together.
protect the wetlands. We still want to do our reg as it's written. This is just an option if push comes to shove and we cannot do our reg.
Okay. Thank you.
Dina?
How do we put a financial dollar amount on a wetland, and who puts that on, and how often is it reviewed?
It's extremely challenging, right? Because land values change, let alone ecological values. So a number of agencies have tried to estimate the green value of having a wetland instead of building a stormwater pond. Those calculations are all out there, but it is extremely challenging. TRCA, Toronto Region, as well as Credit Valley CA, Lake Simcoe, they've all drafted sort of rough calculation tables that can be used, but again, they have to be updated for land values, equipment rental values, all those sorts of things. So it gives you a rough ballpark for the cost of creating something, but again, it doesn't offset for the fact that, this frog species provides this value to the ecosystem. You can't put a dollar value on that. So
is the financial compensation a sliding scale based on particular sites, or is it a number derived from a table?
again, right now, the examples that I have from other CAs that have had these in place for more years than we have, they have these tables that make sure you're checking all the boxes as a guideline to follow, but it's not necessarily something that we've decided to pursue that table. has yet to be discussed and gone forward with. So this is just, proposing that it's an option, but we definitely need to flesh out how we're going to handle that here.
Thank you. I think Sally has something to add to this.
Yeah, so a document we want to develop for our day in, day out kind of use, although I certainly hope we never are doing this on a day in, day out basis, but is the guidelines that would help us in that. So what we're bringing forward to you today is policy changes to make sure, direction from the board at the highest level and on the objectives we're going to be pursuing, that we're all on the same page there. And then we're going to be developing, more detailed guidelines, both for use by ourselves as well as the applicants, so that they can say, see, here's the analysis that we're going to be needing to do. Here's the information you need to provide to enable us to do that analysis and those calculations, however that looks. But I think to Kelly's point, and we try to stress that in the report here, every site's going to be different. So what makes sense for your calculation for site A may not be appropriate for site B. And we need to be prepared to defend that position, that not all land is created equally, and therefore the calculation may in fact be different. But we'll see, as we flesh out these guidelines, how we feel comfortable administering the policy.
Thank you, Sally. I think unless there's some more questions or comments, we should probably move along to the proposed edits to sections 9.6. It's attachment 1. Sally, do you want to lead this conversation?
Sure. So attachment 1, this is an existing section in the policy document. So what we're doing by these edits is introducing this concept of the mitigation hierarchy. We're providing for ecological offsetting plans and agreements to formalize any sort of proposal that we're receiving from them. So they will propose an ecological offsetting plan. We will enter into an agreement regarding that plan once we're all agreed on what that plan should say. We're doing a little bit of clarification work in sections 4 and 5 and 6, just to make sure the agreement, our policy is allowing for any number of avenues. When we contemplated this, we thought that the only reason these might be required is because there's been a ministerial order or some, edict from the province. But the policy at the provincial level now is really housing first. And therefore, we need to be prepared to think about this for regulated areas. Because I think the key point that we didn't want to lose sight of is we are talking about regulated areas where development is prohibited. So if the pressures are such that we have to go in that direction, then we want this framework to guide it. So that in a nutshell is what these edits in red are doing.
So this might be a silly question, but who really wants to live in a wetland unless it's someone who wants to live on water? So we're not talking here really about affordable housing. We're talking more about people who can afford to build very big houses on the water and want to build in wetland areas.
Either that or developers of other types of land uses where they have the money to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. But generally speaking, you're going to bring in a lot of fill, and that
Yeah.
doesn't come cheaply. And then to implement any of these offsetting measures also is costly. So this is not about affordable housing in my estimation.
Yeah, I think that's very clear to me, and that kind of changes how I think about it. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. Anyway, moving on because we only have an hour and we've used quite a bit of it. Has anybody got any comments on the proposed edits that Sally has just went through? Seeing none, Sally, can you tell us what the next step is with this then?
So the next step is once you recommend this to the board, assuming the board approves it, we will put these changes on our website and the document because we have this policy document posted on the web for developers and applicants to review. And then we have a guideline, you know, in draft form. We're going to flesh it out some more. And actually, given that we're having that meeting with the planners in January, we might want to bring a draft to them and just sort of walk them through it and get some feedback on that. And I'm thinking aloud here, admittedly, but Matt's nodding his head. So, so I think that would be a good next step as
So
well.
are you thinking after that, that this needs to come back to this committee again before it goes to the board?
No.
Or does it just go to the board?
This goes directly to the board.
Okay, so it should be seen in the board by March or April, probably.
December. It'll be at the December
But
meeting.
that meeting.
Oh,
isn't-
but that's for the guidelines.
Oh, for the guidelines.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
the policy changes can happen right away.
Okay, and then the guidelines, okay. So that makes sense. Any other discussion or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'll just read the resolution again. It resolved that the Policy and Planning Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve revision of the wetland offsetting policy and other changes in MVCA's development interference with wetlands and alterations to shorelines and watercourses policy as set out in report 3372 /23. If you're in approval, please raise your hand. I think we have. Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to. We'll move on now to the recommendation that the Policy and Planning Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors endorse continued delivery of a year-round stewardship program until December 31st, 2028. And it be resolved that the Policy and Planning Committee recommend that the Board of Directors endorse continued delivery of a year-round stewardship program until December 31st, 2028. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Dina, second by Stephen. Someone's going to, Marissa? Thank you, Marissa. If you could give us a report.
Yes, just one moment while we figure out technology. It's only been 3 years and I still am not really sure how to use this. Oh, maybe.
Yeah, it's here. I just need to big
Okay.
screen it.
Beautiful. Everyone can see that okay? Awesome, perfect. Yeah, so my name is Marissa. I'm the stewardship technician here at MVCA. I'm just going to quickly go over some of our stewardship program plans and objectives that we've met in the past 3 years. So a quick little background, the Mississippi River Watershed Plan first recommended the stewardship program pilot. This was approved by the board in the 2021 budget process, with the program launching later that year with an accompanying stewardship plan. So obviously we're coming up to the end of that 3-year program, which is why we're doing the review today. So one of the main things that came out of this plan was the division of our watershed for stewardship activities. So you see here, we've got our lower, middle, and upper watershed. We have a very large watershed, as I'm sure you are all aware. So very different landscapes, very different geographies. So dividing it just kind of allowed us to focus our plans and our efforts in each area. So I'm going to quickly go over some of the highlights from each of the area from the last 3 years. So starting in our upper watershed. So here, obviously, we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot of lakes, rivers, streams. We're seeing very forested areas, a lot of cottage country, crown-owned lands. So we're getting those lakes, those forests. So our focus here was really on kind of maintaining what we have, enhancing, educating landowners on how they can be responsible landowners. So through this, we've done 190 shrubs and trees planted and over 1,400 given away through our shoreline naturalization and Lake Tree Days program. So at the bottom there, you'll see our Lake Tree Days program. We've done 285 septic re-inspections. So again, the prevention piece. And between myself and Kelly at monitoring, we've attended several lake association meetings, as well as annual lake links. Again, we're really just trying to educate landowners on how to responsibly steward their lakes. And then we have our middle watershed. So we're still seeing a lot of those lakes, rivers, streams, some large, small wetlands throughout, but we're also seeing that abundance of agricultural use, especially in our eastern portion. So our focus here, again, education, helping landowners kind of achieve higher levels of habitat enhancement through grant programs and existing programs. So one of the major things we've done here is launch Alice Lanark. We did that in 2022, so we are in year 2. Bit of a slower start with less funding, and now we've kind of expanded. So we've actually tripled our amount of projects in the past 2 years. And most of those projects have been in our watersheds. We've had 4 in the middle watershed. So you see at the bottom there, that's actually a wetland that was created through Alice programming. And at the top there, you'll see a photo of a planting along a municipal drain we did that I dragged all the planners out to come help me with. We also did a large scale tree planting and delayed haying incentive projects. We've planted 44 shrubs and trees and distributed 643, again, through those shoreline naturalization programs. We've done 44 septic re-inspections. So you can see the number 4 seems to be really popular here in the middle watershed. And through a partnership with Rideau Valley, where they do large scale tree planting on our behalf, they've actually planted over 60,000 trees in the middle watershed just in the past 3 years. And then moving on, of course, we've got our lower watershed. So here we are seeing much more agricultural, rural, urban land use. There is still some forest cover, but it's quite fragmented and privately owned. Same with our wetland complexes. So we do have our Alice Lanark boundary extends into this area. We've had 3 projects in this part of the watershed. They've all been tree or shrub planting projects, 2 large scale tree planting and 1 wetland shrub planting. We've done 35 projects through our Ottawa Real Clean Water program. About 50% of these have been forest management plans, but we have done some buffers, some windbreaks, a couple well decommissionings, nutrient management plans. And very excitingly, at our last meeting, we approved a wetland restoration project in the city as well. Again, we've got the 958 shoreline trees and shrubs planted through our shoreline program. We reinstated our city stream watch this year, so that kind of fell off with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's something we brought back, and that's been kind of passed on to the stewardship staff. Again, the Rideau Valley's large scale tree planting program, 180,000 trees planted in the past 3 years alone, which is a huge number. And then we've also been able to do a lot of invasive removals, stream cleanups, and habitat enhancement projects in this area. So you'll see the top right corner, that was actually a turtle nest project where we created a nesting mound for the northern map turtles. And we got to involve, I think, about 10 volunteers in that project, which was really exciting. So we've definitely created a lot of really great programming, gotten a lot of really good participation from landowners, but this program's not without its challenges. Major one, as I said, our watershed is huge. We've got some geographical constraints there. And with that, we have some programming and funding gaps. It's not to compare us to Rideau Valley, but you'll see in this photo here, that very light blue, it's kind of hard to see, is the Rural Clean Water Program that's delivered through the City of Ottawa. You have that green, which is the Rural Clean Water Program delivered through RVCA, and same with that dark purple, which is where our Lanark program intersects with that Rural Clean Water Program. So we don't have any of that intersection. So we have filled in a lot of the gaps by bringing in Alice Lanark, by allowing more grant opportunities for landowners in Lanark County. However, only registered farmers can qualify for that program. So we are missing that kind of rural landowner piece. Of course, public engagement and education is such a huge part of stewardship, and COVID-19 really did slow that progress for us. But I will say in the past year or 2, we've really kind of brought that back. And just again, the public interest and engagement is not always where we want it to be, but we continue to try to educate people through outreach and volunteer programs. And then finally, sustainability. So this program would not exist without our various funders. We try to grab some long-term funding for ongoing programs. So like Alice Canada helps fund Alice Lanark. The city funds our Ottawa Rural Clean Water program. And then for other projects and programs, we look at more short-term grants quite often. And we also definitely rely on our partnerships. So we partner quite closely with a lot of other CAs, our local municipalities, our councillors, lake associations, lake stewards, and any other stewardship organizations in the area. We do a lot of projects such as your wetland projects with people like Ducks Unlimited to kind of help stack that funding and that technical knowledge. And then moving forward for our next steps for this program, again, we're just going to continue those efforts to secure those grants and those partnerships to make sure this program is as cost effective as possible. We're targeting our efforts on community outreach and education. Again, just talking to those landowners, making sure they know what's available to them and the ways they can steward their land responsibly. And then not just working with partners, but also working with our staff existing, particularly our monitoring team. It's great, again, that we could say, oh, we planted 900 trees in the city, but what does that actually mean? How does that look in the future? And then working with our planning and reg staff on our restoration sites. Any questions?
Could you stop sharing your screen here so we can see
Sure.
people?
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? Dina?
Am I right in thinking that our municipal agreements went to the same timeline as the 2028 proposed?
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments, Stephen?
When septic re-inspections, what does that consist of?
I don't do them. Not to know what exactly it consists of.
Sally will make a comment here.
And then I noticed in, is it North Frontenac, it's voluntary, and in Central Frontenac, it's mandatory?
Mhm.
Is that
Correct.
working well?
Well, I have been on one a long time ago, but essentially you give a form to the landowner and you check the status of the tank, you check the layers. There's a certain amount of hardening that happens in your tank, and then they give a recommendation if you should have a pump out or if there's any infrastructure like sometimes baffles or filters. So they do a pretty, from my understanding, they do a pretty detailed inspection, but I can get you the details on exactly if that's changed since I've been on site or been exposed to it. So it's, and you get a report, like a couple page report. So if it helps landowners if they need to address the deficiencies, or if someone's, I've known people that are, selling the property, it's a great thing to have eventually, knowing the status of your system. So there's all sorts of benefits, and not only your tank, but your septic bed gets inspected as well. So
I can see it working, won't be perfect if everything's okay, but what about the ones that don't go so well? What happens there? Is it for your information only, or is there a work order or something placed there?
I believe if it's a mandatory inspection, like the municipality has
Central?
central, then you are required to address those issues. Where other ones, I live in Tay Valley. You at the point when I had one done, it was strongly encouraged to address these, and but I believe on lakes like Audie Lake, it's mandatory because you're looking at the end result and how that affects other people in the
And-
natural environment.
And do you like tell people we're coming in 30 days to do an inspection, or do they just show up, or did you?
They're
have to-
notified, like they're mailed out.
Okay.
You're definitely notified. You can be there if you want to when the inspectors come, or you don't have to be.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
If you want, if that's not good enough, I definitely can get you
I
more.
could
answers.
go along for a ride someday.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's
No,
a real possibility.
No, I can just see it. Some people would be concerned.
If I could just supplement that. So this is a municipal program that we administer for the municipalities. It's not a conservation authority program. It's considered a category 2 program. Mostly in that the septic approvals under the Ontario Building Code is a municipal responsibility. Historically, the health units did it. Now we're doing it on behalf of several, but not all our local municipalities. Some have introduced, as Matt indicated, a optional reinspection program that's managed quite distinctly from the mandatory, Section 8 of the Building Code, I think it is. And interestingly, the last term of council, all 4 jurisdictions around Mississippi Lake were looking at trying to be on the same page, that It was sort of either all of us need to make it mandatory reinspection because it was going to be politically difficult for any one of the municipalities to go it alone in terms of requiring re-inspections. And so they were contemplating it and talking to the province at that time about, can you just make it mandatory potentially? Because there is a concern about the quality on Mississippi Lake from an intensification and aging of this infrastructure, and not just intensification through land severance, but also because so many of those houses around Mississippi Lake used to be cottages, seasonal use only systems could be quite aged and now sustaining year-round use. So it's an excellent program, but most municipalities at this time have been, I think, reticent to make it mandatory. But I think most of them see the validity, the validity and value of pursuing them.
But easier if it wasn't our idea type deal. Then is it the town municipalities that pay for it, or does the cost go to the landowner?
Is it 100% borne by the townships?
Yes, I believe they budget and that's something the council members decide on whether they want to have that program. And the number of properties varies depending on obviously pressures. So, and then they're prioritized based on, probably our input. So.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. We'll call the question then. So all in favor, raise your hands. And that passes. So what are we down to now?
Meeting to be adjourned.
Oh, yes, this is, yeah. So the resolution is that the Policy and Planning Advisory Committee meeting of November 29th, 2023, that the meeting be adjourned. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
I think we only need a mover.
Oh, do we have a mover? Dina, you're moving? We don't have to vote on it either? I don't know. Yeah, I guess anybody who disagrees can stay, but the rest of us are leaving. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.